We all cling on to things that no longer serve us without even realizing it. For some of us, it might be hoarding material possessions. We didn't have much growing up, and so we hoard what little we have. For other people, it might be in our communication style. The hostile environment that we grew up in has us communicating defensively in all of our interactions. These things served a critical need for us at one time or another, but now they no longer serve us. In this episode, we'll explore letting go of things that no longer serve us, identifying and discussing a few examples, why these patterns exist in our lives, and how we can break free from those to live a happier, more peaceful life. All of the things that make up you, the habits you have, the patterns you have, are consisting of a combination of nature, your DNA, what you might be predisposed to, things that have helped your ancestors survive so that you could be here, or nurture. They're a result of your surroundings, the environment you grew up in, your family dynamics, the friends you made and spent time with in school, and on and on and on. And the person you are today has been carefully constructed from both the DNA you can't control to the patterns and the habits you developed, oftentimes in infancy years where you were unaware of the influence your environment was having on you. And so the person you are oftentimes is a direct result of these things. But as we grow older, our lives change. And many of us are still hanging on to the things that are no longer serving us in the form of bad habits or patterns. These habits and patterns at one point resolved a need. They were a necessity for our survival, but they might not be serving us anymore. In fact, they might actually be hurting us. Personal transformation and identifying and changing these key aspects about ourselves can be difficult. It's hard to update the software when we're actively running it. The software being ourselves, our habits and patterns, and the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives and about the world. This is the idea of the snake shedding its skin. If a snake doesn't successfully shed its skin, it dies. We must undergo a similar transformation if we want to be able to truly evolve, be happy, and be our best selves. So you might be asking yourself, what are the things that no longer serve us that we're clinging on to? For me, at one point, it was a default aggressive state, as a general lack of empathy, and the idea that hard work can override everything else. That became a personal narrative for me because it got me to where I was. I worked my face off to get good grades in community college, pay for school on my own, get accepted into Babson College, my number one school at the time, where I was originally rejected. And it helped me accomplish the things that I accomplished in both my personal and professional life. I worked hard in the gym and I transformed my physique. I worked hard in my career and it got me to pay my way through school. I worked harder than everyone in community college, and it got me into the top entrepreneurial school in the country. That narrative of hard work trumps all and that people just need to work hard to get where they want and where they need in life, it served a core need for me, and it was a core part of my identity up until that point. It helped me survive and it helped me to progress. But there became a point where it no longer served me. The general lack of empathy and the idea that everyone can just work harder to succeed, I later learned was flawed. I had a glimpse into this when I went to El Salvador twice for volunteer work, and I met people that were less fortunate than I was. No amount of hard work would help those people if they didn't even have access to food and running water. And it made it even worse in my career. I rubbed many people the wrong way with my general lack of empathy and work harder attitude. And while I advanced my career, I would have probably done it differently if I could go back and identify this at the time. It was a personal narrative that I clung to, but it served me at one point in my life, and I had to later learn to let that part of me go because it was no longer useful and no longer serving me. Maybe for you it was perfectionism as an academic. I have to maintain these excellent grades and everything has to be perfect before I can do anything. And now you find yourself procrastinating or taking too much time to execute and do things that you want to do because nothing ever seems to reach that stage of perfection that you really wanted. We see people who are extreme hoarders, people who didn't have much and are stringent and save everything. They didn't have much growing up, and now they feel the need to hold on to everything, every material thing that they possess. Maybe it's defensive communication. You grew up in a hostile environment. Yelling and shouting, high conflict was the norm. It might be default to have that defensive communication style. You have to learn to evolve past it once you recognize it. Might be cultural or family beliefs of status and success, holding on to beliefs like job and your material possessions that might not align with what actually makes you happy. I laugh at times when I see this in my own family. They've got multiple freezers full of food because they didn't have food growing up, so now we pack it away just in case. It's important to reiterate, there was nothing wrong with some of these ideas and beliefs. They likely served a critical need for us at one point or another in our life. The challenge lies in clinging on to beliefs where they no longer serve us. So, how do we identify these areas in our life that serve needs at one point, but now they no longer serve us? It's important to think through our own lives. What areas are we looking to improve? This may be through deep thought, meditation, a journaling exercise. Think through the areas that we may not be happy in our lives, thinking through what those areas are and how we may want to improve those. From there, it's important to reflect on why we do the things the way we do them. Why do we communicate the way we do? Why do we have the habits and the patterns that we have? Get really curious, and you'll likely find some answers. One way that I've found some of the things that I was clinging on to is I look for clues in other people. We oftentimes see things in other people that are only a projection of ourselves. If we find that people often seem defensive in their communication, maybe that's a direct projection of our own communication style and the environment that we grew up in that developed it. Once we've identified some areas that are suboptimal, it's important to be graceful to ourselves. Acknowledge that these are habits that were developed for a reason and give ourselves some grace. Once we can do that, we can be more free to be able to let those parts of ourselves go in order to grow into something new. Have empathy for yourself and accept and understand that these are parts of ourselves that once served a critical need, but now they no longer do. Now that it no longer serves that need, we can grow and develop beyond it and develop new habits and new patterns that help us to become closer to the person that we want to become. We all have areas in our lives that we want to improve, and we all cling on to old habits that no longer serve us. It's important to spend time working on ourselves to identify where these suboptimal areas exist. Taking the time to accept that they once served a need and now they no longer do. And once we're graceful with ourselves, we can begin to unpack those habits and patterns and move on to new habits and patterns that better serve us for where we are now. I hope you found this helpful. Leave a comment or reach out to me with any thoughts or questions. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this Embetterment episode. Take care.